It certainly was the best that it could be done at the time.
It's the largest film project I think we ever did. It was the first year of our company, Stetson Visual Services, in 1989, and one of our inaugural projects. We had a shop that was about 45 miles away from DreamQuest Images in Simi Valley, where all the work was shot, and built all the miniatures, which are very large miniature landscapes, in our shop in Westchester, and then trucked them up to DreamQuest for final assembly up there for the photography. It was a very large endeavor. It was the largest film project I think we ever did. We thought that it seemed odd that DreamQuest would look to us, because they had a model shop of their own, would look to us to do the work on the film. But when we realized the scope of the work, we realized that there wasn't enough room at DreamQuest at that time to really build and prep the miniatures and then get them in there. We ended up renting a warehouse next to our shop, so we had about 20,000 square feet of miniature construction space for the movie. And to do that off-site, even though we had to truck the stuff all 45 miles away, it really let us pre-sculpt and pre-build everything and then install it on their stages very quickly. All the final dressing was done on stage, so that all the details of the red soil and the tiny little trains and everything else, that was all, put in place up in Simi Valley. So it was several days of installation time for each of the miniature landscapes. We did not only the Martian landscapes, but also the little vehicles, the spaceship that brings them to Mars, and the little train that he rides across, and then also the reactor interior, the atmospheric reactor interior on the planet in several scales for the work that was done in there, including the explosive firing up of the reactor at the end. Those were days when you really needed a lot of scale a lot of size to make the miniature events like steam and smoke and fire believable. And so that was a pretty elaborate, large mountain structure. There were some nice little tricks that we used to sort of expand the scope and scale of the miniatures. I had tried a gag on 2010 earlier in my career where we had a sort of a multi-planed miniature setup where we had a painted backing traveling with the camera as it dollied across the front of the miniature, so that it made the backing appear to be at infinity, where the miniature was, or as the camera was traveling by the miniature in the foreground. We did the same trick on Total Recall in the train ride from the spaceport into the city when Arnold's riding on the train. He came up with this little, this great little rear projection device for the abyss that we modeled into the train, so that the scene of Arnold at the train's window looking out, and the camera pulls out very wide to reveal the whole landscape. That was done actually as a rear projection gag. So, the shot of Arnold that Eric Brevik had shot in Mexico was then rear projected into this tiny little screen, probably only about this big, inside the train car, and the camera pulled out wide, and you see the entire landscape. It was kind of cool. We used a lot of front projection on the rods. We had two scales of the reactor rods. The small ones we wrapped with front projection material, and the cinematographer Alex Funke used a beam splitter device to illuminate the rods as they appeared to glow. Then the larger scale ones we built as acrylic tubes and lit them from within, so that as the camera got closer in, you'd needed to have that internal light to make them look more real. And Bob and his special effects team came up with some fairly large steam generator plants so that as the rods are inserted into the ice base of the cavern, all this steam comes rising up in these huge clouds of steam. And it was pretty impressive to watch. Usually, miniature scale things don't look like much until you see them played back from their high-speed photography. But in this case, they were pretty big gags all by themselves. For miniature effects work, it was pretty great. Eric Brevig came up with a really nice gag, I thought, for one of the pull-out shots at the end of the movie as after the mountain has exploded and the atmosphere is formed. There was a scene where all the mutant residents of the city step outside into the air, and the camera pulls very wide, and we see a final wide tableau of the landscape. And Eric did that with a front projection gag on a little curved screen. It was probably only about that big, built into one of the miniature areas, and the camera pulled back from there, and it was really a seamless integration of the element that was shot for that, I thought. Alex Funke did a really nice gag for moving clouds for those wide scenes too at the end of the movie after the atmosphere was formed. The idea was to show sort of earth lighting at that time, so he had little cloud shapes strung on wires across the top of the set, and again, these were warehouse buildings and not huge stages, so he had a griffle on the top of the ceiling of the set, as high as he could make it, and bounced the light up into them, and then had these little shadow grids on wires moving, pulled by motion control across the set, and cast shadows practically on the landscape. I thought he did a great job at that. It's really beautiful. It was so relentlessly red. We were very worried about it in the days of VHS and red bleed and bloom and all the transfers afterwards. Paul said quite emphatically that he didn't care about the video aftermarket. All he wanted was his film to be red on camera in the theaters, and that Mars, of course, we were working entirely in Mars, and to have this big transition into this red environment was really kind of nice. We ended up with a lot of red stucco dyes dusting very gently over our landscape, so the finished work on it was all in this red powder because of the fine scale we were working in. Everybody got very dirty. Generally, as soon as Alex Funke was done shooting them, we'd take them outside and break them up. And at the end of it, when all the last sets were broken up, we had a bit of a party. And there was a forklift involved that we'd haul the things out, raise them up as high as the forklift would go, and smash them on the ground. Clouds of red dust.
Get him! Let's go! Don't move! Let's go!
When we first started talking about the concept of what would you see for an X-ray, I mean, we didn't really have these devices yet for the airport. And everybody remembers the one where you stick your foot in your shoe and you could X-ray your foot to see how well the fit was when we were kids back in the 50s and 60s. But people had been looking at medical imaging and had seen amazing images of skin and muscle and bone, and we had ideas of trying to take it that far, but when it was really beyond the technology of what we could have pulled off at the time, that didn't keep us from thinking we might want to try it still. But Paul then ultimately fell in love with just the clean graphic image of what a human skeleton by itself looks like. And then the ability to make it that color that everybody thinks electronic instruments should look like when they're photographed with film, which is this sort of cyan green color. So the challenge for us was to get convincing human motion so that we believe that's really the same person walking behind the screen rather than that it's an effect. And we needed to come up with a way of rendering something that looked like an X-ray. And X-rays always show the edge of the bone, but the center of the bone is transparent. But yet, to have a real detailed, interesting image, you need to also see some of the spirally variations that bones have. And so we came up with 2 techniques that we applied to the rendering to make it look like an X-ray. One was to use what was a trick, which was called center and edge opacity. You could make the edge more transparent or more opaque, and then the center the opposite. In the case of, we used to do that as a trick to make glass look like crystal. And so we used that technique to make the edges of the bone more visible and the center more transparent, and then we used opacity mapping, which we had to write some special software to make that happen. When we first set up the motion capture equipment, Arnold was shooting some other scenes nearby, and he walked over and he was smoking a cigar, and he walked up and back on the motion capture stage. And since he was on the stage, we figured, well, let's see how high we need to set the calibration for his height, because he's a pretty tall guy and you got to put a ball on top of his head. So we said, Arnold, is it all right if we put this ball on top of your head? We need to calibrate. And so he looked at us straight in the eye, was puffing his cigar, because they play a lot of jokes on set, and he thought this might have been one of them. So he's looking us in the eyes, we put the ball on his head, and he stands up. He said, again, now if you could walk back and forth, and he did. And then we said, okay, thank you very much, and give us back the ball. And he realized it wasn't a joke, but it seemed like a very strange thing at that time to be doing. On the day of the motion capture, Arnold, we had asked the wardrobe people to dress Arnold in black, and he was going to wear all these sensors that were going to show up light. And we thought that would be the best solution. But the video cameras were really black and white video cameras. And Arnold showed up that day with white. And we said, oh, Arnold, there's a mistake. You're supposed to be wearing black. And Arnold said to us, no, 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 no. You don't talk to me. You talk to wardrobe. I'm wearing this now. We shoot with this. He wore 18 balls, I believe, that were reflective balls. There were lights at 6 different video cameras around capturing his motion. And then the computer went and figured out that that dot that's seen from this camera is the same dot as seen from this camera and these other 5 cameras, so that can then figure out where that ball is in space. And so we shot everything that we needed to do in that day. We captured everything. I was being told throughout the capture of the motion capture from the motion capture guy whose system this was. He said, oh yeah, this is the best motion capture we've ever captured. It's gonna be great. We're gonna put it in the computer and it's gonna just spit out perfect motion, and we're all very encouraged and we're all very happy about this. And we complete the shooting and the capture. And then weeks later, we find out that it's not working at all. They can't get anything from it. In fact, one of the bad pieces of news from the motion capture company was they said, well, maybe we could get a cycle from his motion from it and give you that. And it's like, that would only work if he's doing something very regular, like just walking at a regular pace, and that was it. But Arnold comes in and he does a whole lot of other stuff, and then he breaks through the glass at one point. So, cycle was not going to help us at all. So we realized we were going to have to rotoscope from footage that was not really prepared for that kind of work. So it turned out that it was a completely wonderful thing that Arnold was wearing white, because then we could make out his whole form, all of his limbs, and be able to rotoscope and match the motion of the computer skeleton to his real motion. Had he worn black like we had requested, it would have been much harder, if not impossible. So thank God Arnold's wardrobe person didn't do our request and that he wouldn't change. Luckily for us, we shot a backplate camera that showed us the opposite side of the screen, because when the actor walks into the screen, it isn't really an X-ray device, so we don't really see what's going on behind it. We just see them walk in, then they come out the other end, and we don't know what happened in between. So with this back camera, we were able to see all of the characters, how their walks might have changed in relation to each other. And in fact, the introductory shot has like 8 people, including Arnold, and one of the persons is supposed to be blind, and he has a seeing eye dog. And that dog, as he's walking through the take that Paul liked the best, the dog decided that it would be a nice time to relieve himself. And first, Paul thought it would be funny if the dog actually does that in the x-ray, because again, from the front, we could make the dog do anything we want because we couldn't see what he was really doing. But then Paul thought that perhaps that would be too distracting and people would go away remembering that instead of remembering that this is how the x-ray is supposed to work in a normal situation, because the next time we see it in the film, it's when Arnold has a gun, which it's designed to detect. So he decided to have us make the dog continue to walk normally instead of stop and try to relieve himself.
You are now entering a safety zone. No unauthorized weapons allowed beyond this point. You are now entering a safety zone. No unauthorized weapons allowed beyond this point.
He was known for having a temper. When we came down to Mexico, we had already heard stories about people who had bad run-ins with him on set, and we were nervous. But Paul was always really great with us. We had a very easy time working with him, and I remember one time we were in the edit room putting together the sequence and refining the animation, and I remember I was sort of pushing a point that I really wanted to see in that particular shot. And Paul just stopped and looked at me, and I realized, oh my God, shut up. I've already said this thing 1 or 2 or 3 times already. He already said no, and he's just looking at me wondering, how many more times am I going to do that? And I just realized, oh, sorry, Paul. He never yelled, he never got upset. It was just very easy to work with him. Sometimes he would be caught trying to say something that was that he was trying to express some idea that he was trying to verbalize, and there would be times when he would sort of get stuck. I remember he explained to us very well how he wanted the color red for when the device goes off and detects the guns, and we said it could be any color you like, and he said red, but he said red this very, very long-winded, multiple repetitious thing that you could just tell that he was really thinking about it. He was sort of having an argument with himself almost in front of us, and then the answer was red, and that was it.
Hold it! He's over there! Don't move!
We had the only CG in the film, and at that time what we did was really hard, and computers were pushed to the limit to do that kind of work at that time, and there was far more handwork required to make it work, since the motion capture technique didn't work directly. So actually there was a lot of hand keyframed finessed pieces to it, and the rendering of it and the compositing of it wasn't really that hard for that time, but getting that kind of animation at that time with the tools as they were was very difficult. So we were just happy as heck when we finally delivered the animation, and we were one of the first effects to be delivered as a final. And for us, it was longer than it should have been and much more scary, that it was going to turn out all right. And when we finally got the final elements delivered for the, 15, 16 shots that we had in the film, all this stuff was combined optically back then. So a negative is struck from the original negative, an inner positive and an inner negative, and then our stuff is an original negative, and then there are all these levels of mats and things like that to be able to let the level of opacity and transparency that needed to be there for the X-ray effect on the screen. And so all these things are fine-tuned, but there's lots of layers of celluloid, and they pick up dust. The more times you use the optical elements again, they start to get dirty or scratched, or eventually you get to a point where you need to remake the elements again if you've run the optical too many times. And because the visual effects budget of the movie was challenged already, when we finally had the animation working perfectly, they didn't want to clean the elements. And so my visual effects producer, George Merkert, and myself were thinking, well, you know, this is the biggest thing in our life so far in visual effects that we've ever done, and they don't want to spend the extra money, so maybe if we cough up $6,000, you know, between the two of us, maybe if we tell the visual effects producer that we're willing to do that so that we rerun the optical with new elements, you know, maybe that'll work. And by telling her that, she was moved that we would even suggest that, but you know, we felt like, you know, we're going to look terrible if this thing isn't perfect. You know, we wanted it to be the best, and so it sort of moved her, and she made sure that they were paid for another optical run and create the elements again, and it looked perfect the next time we saw it, and we were thrilled. I remembered that when the original film came out, because we were relatively new at doing visual effects in feature films, we didn't really know how to negotiate properly for screen credits. So we were negotiated into a position of having what's called a company credit only. So instead of saying George Merkert, Tim McGovern, and the rest of the crew, it just said Metrolight Studios, which was the company that we worked for at the time. And we had hoped that that was going to change somehow, but we went to the cast and crew screening, and we waited through the whole movie, you know, saw our effect cut into the whole. That's the first time we saw it cut in context to the entire film. We'd seen pieces, you know, the pieces we had done, but not the rest. And, you know, the rest of the work in the movie is fantastic, you know, especially, again, you have to put everything in the context of 1990 when it came out, but it's, you know, so much of it is still great by today's standards. But when we saw the credit at the end and it just said Metrolight Studios, our hearts were broken. We were like, oh God, we don't even get our name on it, for God's sakes. So when the film went on to win the Academy Award for visual effects, and when the producer and director had decided, you know, who the 4 people were going to be named, they thought the visual effects that were done with the computer-generated part had added a dimension to the film that they thought was important enough to mention. That sort of shamed the people who didn't give us a screen credit. So the video tape, which in those days, this was a VHS videotape release, when the VHS tape came out, we had a credit, the names of everybody who worked on the film. So we were very thrilled about that. So years later, when I worked at Sony, I ran Sony Pictures Imageworks. It took it from 8 people up to 250 people. And there was a moment when they said, we got a brand new print from Total Recall. Let's all go take a look at it, you know, and bring the whole company. And so everybody's sitting there and seeing the whole movie and seeing our sequence and, you know, clapping when they see the sequence that they knew that I'd worked on. And then when the credits come up, my name's not in there because it's the theatrical release, which didn't have the credits changed. So everybody's sitting there talking to me afterwards, going, hey, you know, your name wasn't in the credits, what happened? It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, yeah. You know, it's in the video, but not in the film.
My name is Paul Verhoeven. I'm the director of Total Recall.
Get ready for a surprise!
I remember exactly, I was sitting on the couch like this in Los Angeles. We only had an apartment at that time. And I was reading all these scripts that came in, and I was reading it and throwing it away, reading it and throwing it away. And then finally I remember it exactly this by special courier, this script came, Total Recall, and I started to read it, and they had said, well, if you like it, you have to let us know in 3 hours, and then we are going to introduce you to Arnold Schwarzenegger, because whatever you think, he is going to play it. This double reality, is it a dream or is it reality, and it goes up and down and this and that, was so intriguing and so, for me, so European in fact, you know, it was not very American. So I was so intrigued that I immediately thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I thought there was a problem with the third act, but I was very optimistic at that time. Yeah, I felt very confident, you know, I felt, because I thought that the problems of the third act, I thought, okay, I'm going to solve that, you know, that should not be so difficult. And then I signed my contracts and everything. Then I started to be really frightened, because I realized that this was script version number 42. There were 41 scripts before, where they had never solved the last act. There is these two worlds, isn't it? The dream world or the real world, and what's what.
Honey, are you all right?
And that went on for 2 acts.
You're dreaming.
It was like, okay, there's 2 acts where you have something to think about, and then it was all shooting, running, chasing, shooting, but there was no philosophical issue anymore. How can we bring something, let's say, that is not action alone, that is something else, into the third act?
Howdy, Quaid. If you're listening to this, that means that Quado is dead, and you have led us to him.
I asked Gary Goldman, that was my scriptwriter that I brought in, and he then came with this idea that Arnold Schwarzenegger is, in reality, is a guy called Hauser who works for Cohagen. And Cohagen has transformed Hauser into a spy that is not aware anymore of his where he's coming from, and put him on Earth.
Hey, maybe we meet in our dreams.
Cohagen tells Arnold, in reality, you are a bad guy, like me. And now there was this thing that they're going to change him again. First of all, the revelation that he was not a good guy, then basically they're going to change him into a bad guy back, and then him resisting that and choosing for his new life. That's what we used as changing a reality element, isn't it? Now everything is reversed suddenly, because the good guy becomes the bad guy too. That was for us, let's say, the possibility to make this act not only chasing, then basically finally when he breaks out of this chair and then has to basically save the planet, say, that last 15 minutes, of course, is action. That's Arnold in one word, I would say, in one image, that him fighting with this boring machine that basically that he knows how to handle, because it was his job to do it the other way, but he knows how to handle these things. I think it's a great shot, in fact.
Where the fuck are you?
Using Arnold forced us to go in a certain direction. In that story, in the original Philip Dick story, he was an accountant and a boring guy, you know, that becomes then strong. But with Arnold, we changed that all. We gave Arnold this boring machine and stuff, so that he would be a laborer, he would be a blue-collar guy. That would be very convincing, and it is, of course. You believe that he does that, isn't it? But I was very much aware that it should be light. If I would make it too serious, I don't think people would believe it with Arnold. Then you should have somebody like Colin Farrell, or like they had in the past Richard Dreyfuss, or Patrick Swayze. That's more normal, isn't it? Harrison Ford, of course, in Blade Runner is serious, isn't it? There's no funniness there. There's no jokes there. There's no lightness. It's a pretty dark movie, in fact. And I felt that with Arnold that could not be. Now I'm very interested to see what happens if you take this Philip Dick story and make it serious. And I think, in retrospect, I believe that I was very lucky to get Arnold, because it forced me into a light style.
am I?
Arnold is not Laurence Olivier, you know. He is not a trained actor. His charisma is what carries him.
Hope you enjoyed the ride.
If you ask Arnold to look in the camera like this, huh? What I do now, basically, then that would express 10 times more than what I get out of that, you know. Because there is something, the way the face is structured, sculptured nearly his face there. And there is this intensity in the eyes, bluish eyes, that basically if you make a close-up with Arnold and he looks like that, that is already wonderful to look at, you know. Then he doesn't have to act, he has nearly to be. It was pleasant, but it took time. It took time to get what I would call a real performance, and so that his voice would not be robotic. I let him do many takes, some 20, 30, 40 takes. Because I thought that I could get a better performance. And the interesting thing is that Arnold thought so too. So when I said to Arnold, we've done 20 takes, but we're still not there. He said, Paul, we're going on. Up, next take. And we do on, and on, and on, and on. Till I could say, okay, I think we have it. And I said, next shot, he would say. Arnold was completely confident that I could solve everything. He gave himself fully to me. The most loyal, the most supportive actor I've ever met in my life. I mean, the movie was everything. But it was not that I want this, I want that. It is, you want, I'll make sure that you get it. That was his attitude. And when there were problems, financial problems, then he would go to the producers. And he would say, I want it. On the set was kind of funny because I was from Holland and he was from Austria. And then basically when we were talking about scenes and about dialogue, we had no idea sometimes which was the right pronunciation. For example, there was a discussion about dreaming, which is part of the movie. And I dreamt or I dreamed in the past, isn't it? The past of I dreamed or I dreamt. And we were discussing it. I say, no, it is this. And Arnold said, well, I think it's that. And ultimately we had to go to the script and say, what do you think? Is it? So that's how we worked. He runs back with bang, and he grabs that thing there. So he's moving down. We had a great crew. I mean, it was a small American crew, and for the rest it was all Mexican. But the cooperation was was very well. I was very much aware of the differences between two cultures because I had made another movie, Flesh and Blood, years before, shooting in Spain, where everybody was against everybody. And I really was very much aware that if I would start shooting in Mexico, that I should embrace the place and the culture and the people. And then Arnold was the same, you know. Arnold even went that far that he would basically study a couple of Spanish lines and then basically when there would be a party, and we would be giving many parties for the crew and the cast, that he would then be able to say something in Spanish, you know. He also felt that integrating the two crews and making them to a whole, that was very important, and we did, and we succeeded. Everybody be careful, yeah? What was not so great is that everybody got sick. Because there is something that they call the curse of Montezuma. Everybody, diarrhea, fever. People were laying down in the trucks, basically working, that couldn't work anymore. They were laying down for days and they brought to the set, but then they couldn't work. I was sick all the time, that you had throwing up, this, that. I mean, whatever it was, you know, even to the degree that I was that I didn't have enough fluid in my, they had to give me artificial this and that. But Arnold who had been working in, I think on Predator or something like that, or Conan, had been working in Mexico before, had brought his own cook. When his cook got sick and he had to eat his ass, then he got also sick. Puerto Rico was completely storyboarded. Everything had to be set up. So the style is more rigid, I would say, because of everything being thought out before and not being able, without over budget, and couldn't change it too much. The same approach, in fact, was for Starship Troopers. At that time, basically, with all these animals we had to create, you had also to realize that a static shot had a certain price. If I would do the camera this or this, it would be higher. And if I would do the camera not only this, but also would do that, that would be really, really expensive. I tried very hard to make it interesting, you know, in the shots. For example, the most simple things like the girl that touches her nails, basically that suddenly change color. The walls of the building, of the room that suddenly change from walls into nature or into television, isn't it? All these little tricks basically were invented as we were writing, and by necessity, because we felt if we don't do these things in the first 20 minutes, then people, suddenly when the people have to believe that somebody is in a dream or not in a dream or can have a dream that is such and so, we need to prepare the audience by all these little visual tricks that other worlds are possible. Look at the reality not as if this is completely a reality. The wall is a wall and suddenly it's nature, isn't it? And the fingers are green and suddenly they're red or whatever. So that was really try to push into the audience brains that when I would make the big step, that the dream was also real or not, whatever, that they would follow me.
I'm unarmed.
For me, the most interesting scene of the movie.
Don't worry, I'm alone.
Is really when this Dr. Edgemar is arriving in Mars and visits Arnold in his hotel room.
I'm afraid you're not really standing here right now.
You know, Doug, you could have fooled me.
I'm quite serious. You're not here, and neither am I.
You're not in Mars, you're still in that chair. And this is all fantasy. And you're dreaming, but we cannot get you out anymore. We cannot stop your dream. I'm sent in to help you come back to reality, come back to your wife. You nearly start to believe this guy. And in fact, you have to believe him, because it might be true.
1 minute, you'll be the savior of the rebel cause, and the next thing you know, you'll be Cohagen's bosom buddy. You'll even have fantasies about alien civilizations, as you requested, but in the end, back on Earth, you'll be lobotomized.
The guy then goes on, and that's the most fascinating moment. That's what we really invented ourselves. That was not in the original script. The guy starts to tell Arnold what's going to happen. And the interesting thing is that he tells you the story of the next hour or about, and then that's what happened. Used an old Volkswagen chassis, the framework and the motor, and then we built this new car, newish car around it. Yes, the person that did that came with proposals that were really good from the beginning, so it was easy going, but it was more to make it not too expensive, you know.
Cohagen's sealing off the area!
Come on, baby!
Yeah, right. I have the big one of that in my house in Los Angeles. Yeah, that is Joost Vercano, that's my DP, who did also Robocop and Starship Troopers and Hollow Man, and then several of my Dutch movies. This is in the studio. This is what we built between the studios. We had several stages, and then but then we needed to go with a car because there are these big machines, these boring machines, and we had to follow them. And there's a chase. This is when we have a chase between the bad guys that are shooting them, and they go with this strange vehicle. They go to the tunnels. We used 2 stages and then built a tunnel between the 2 stages, so you could go from one there, and then we shot in the tunnel. We shot this chase. It was perhaps from here, not so far away till there. It was very short, so we had to use the same area continuously for every shot. You know, if you look well, you see that every shot is nearly shot in the same 20 meters.
Wait, stop! We've got to get air!
The reactor makes air. That's Cohagen's secret. Let's go.
Where's this reactor come from?
Aliens build it.
Aliens? Are you sure about this?
It's just up ahead.
When I came to the United States, I had no idea what special effect people were. In fact, after 6 months, basically, or 4 or 5 months of preparation, the producer, John Davidson, Robocop I'm talking about, said to me, should not we start by finally to develop and create the costume of Robocop, you know? I thought, oh yeah, there's a robot there. How do we do that? And he brought me Phil Tippett, and he brought me Rob Bottin, because I wouldn't have known these people. So I was very lucky to be with a producer from the beginning, with Robocop that knew all these people. And when I made another movie, Total Recall, with another producer, that was more Mario Casar, I thought, you know, for safety reasons, I took all the same people, but I thought they know much more than I, so I'll bring them all to the next movie. That was how it was done. There's a Robotine there, on the side, and with the black hair. Robotine is an extremely inventive person. All these special effects basically that are in the face, basically half a face gone or this or that. That's the magic of Robotine, you know. I think he's one of the great artists in Hollywood. There were certain elements which now could have been done in a better and even easier way with digital processing. This was all real, isn't it? If in Total Recall, when the woman falls apart in these little slivers, isn't it? That was all real, isn't it? That was not, I mean, now you would do that digitally, but that was really a mechanical thing, and then revealing the face of Arnold, which was a puppet.
Sites and even letters.
Of course, there is already a visual telephone there, for example. That is now common, isn't it, with Skyping, although it's still a little tricky. But that is 86, 7 that we invented that, you know. And now it's normal, and people will look at that and think it's very normal that you see each other on the telephone. It was, of course, at that time was anormal and was kind of science fiction. It's now all. Reality has gone in that direction, but we did not do it basically because we wanted to be inventive or being, let's say, show off or whatever. It was really, we felt it is necessary to bring the audience in a certain state of mind that they will accept more and more that there are two realities. People call it the red planet, isn't it? All the soil is red. It might have also a bit more reddish glow. This red glow, it's outside Mexico City. We were looking for location for something else, and then we passed by, and then I said, what is that there? What is that, the red stuff there? And then he said, oh, there's a mountain, so can we go there? And so we were with the crew looking for other locations, and we went there. And then I thought, well, we can shoot this here. This is red, isn't it? So basically, we can shoot the whole scene there, which we did. These landscapes, we used a lot of that, and a lot of that is painting, but there's also miniatures that we used, and partially miniatures that go into painting. That was mostly by the group of Erik Breivik who did that. Immediately after this film, in fact, he went to ILM and became one of the top guys at ILM. It's George Lucas Special Effect Company. He was in charge of these volcanoes, and in fact, I remember at the end of the movie when there is when the volcanoes start to work, isn't it? And the oxygen comes out, when the nuclear reactor of the aliens is starting to work. He said, Paul, he said also that you see how important good collaborators is. Paul, I think when the smoke comes out, that's nice effect, and it's nice effect that Arnold's eyes, because he's thrown into a vacuum, isn't it? And eyes pop up and he nearly fall out of his face and stuff. Of him, I said, but it's not enough. We need some other stuff. We need some explosive stuff. And then he invented these. What you do see that the ground is suddenly basically splitting up, and these things come out. I said, is that necessary? We have enough already. He said, it's not, we need more. Bang, 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 bang. And then basically you have to prepare, we have to prepare it so that people, etc. And then you can listen to something like that and reject, or you can say, oh fuck, yeah, he's right, let's do it, you know? And that's why it's so important to be let's say, completely confident in the people that you choose, not only because you know that they can do what you want, but in fact, more importantly, is that they bring you things you didn't think about. And that you are so confident in these people and have so much respect for them that you think we should try, we should do it. And I think people that disagree with you and dare to say, Paul, I don't think it's true what you're saying, or perhaps it's a half-truth, but that needs, like he said, needs more, it needs more. Competence and its creativity and invention, and you choose them for both.
Have you always wanted to climb the mountains of Mars? But now you're over the hill? Then come to Recall Incorporated, where you can buy the memory of your ideal vacation cheaper, safer, and better than the real thing. So don't let life pass you by. Call Recall for the memory of a lifetime.
For the memory of a lifetime, recall, recall, recall.
I had no relationship to science fiction before I came to the United States. In fact, I thought that most of these movies are completely stupid. All the science fiction. And when I was younger, I had been reading science fiction when I was probably 20 or something, and for some time I had liked it, and then at a certain point I admired Star Wars, of course, like everybody, and that's a big, innovative movie still. But it was like, yes, that is George Lucas doing that. Yeah, I will never do anything like that, because I do movies about normal things, you know. All my movies in Holland were about reality. Even The Fourth Man has much more reality to it than people acknowledge, you know. And ultimately, it was really my wife who pushed me to go to the United States, you know. He said, well, why the fuck are you staying here, you know? Basically, they get these invitations. And then, as an experiment, I did Robocop, which was the first time that I had to deal with a kind of science fiction anyhow. And I went back to my youth, when basically I had been reading comic books about Superman and Spider-Man and whatever science fiction there was in Tintin, of course, in the French magazine. So I thought, okay, I know more or less what that is, that level of filmmaking, and let me try, you know, if we can do it. But it's not because I thought I want to do science fiction. I thought, this is crazy, and this is a crazy project, Robocop, and in fact, the first time I read it, basically I threw it away because I said it's absolutely ridiculous. But again, my wife said you should reread it, because you can do something with it. Well, I mean, it is different, but you can do something with it, which was true ultimately, turned out to be true. It was not so that I thought, after Robocop, now I have found my groove there, you know. It was more that people thought, oh, he can do science fiction, let's send him science fiction. That's what they sent me. So it was coincidence upon coincidence. And I tried to get away from science fiction when I did Basic Instinct and Showgirls. But when Showgirls failed, they didn't trust me anymore with something normal. And I got again science fiction, which led to Starship Troopers and to Hollow Man. But they typecast you there in Hollywood.
Action, slow movement, slow movement.
In the aftermath of Robocop, it was mostly science fiction. And one of these science fiction stories was Total Recall. The basic theme of the movie is so interesting. It was, in fact, you would call it a very postmodern movie. There are two realities. Then people say, what's the real one? And I always said, there is no real one. There is this one and there is that one. There is not this is the true and this is a dream. They're both true. That was my idea, to make a movie about two things that were true, although they were not the same. And there's the two realities that would be as strong as both equivalent.
What if this is a dream?
Well, then kiss me quick before you wake up.
Rachel Ticotin and Arnold, when they kiss each other, there is this line where he says, suppose this is a dream, and then she says, well, kiss me before it's too late. Then it doesn't fade to black, it fades to white. It's like his brain is blown away. Because on Earth, they are now taking him off. So he dies. They're taking him off this system that he's in. So he is then, his brains are lost, and that's why it fades to white. It is just not the end of the movie. No, everything that's there is blown away. So that, I think, is innovative. Is this life that we all assume is real? Or is there perhaps another reality? And are we, like in movies that has been used a lot in The Matrix, for example, and that this is a projection of a secret society that makes us think that we are living, but ultimately we are not doing anything that they don't want to do, etc. Now, all these kind of thinking, a dream, and whatever, all these kind of philosophical, half philosophical, pseudo-philosophical. For me, I think that was very innovative to do that, you know, and to really accept the fact that there are two realities. This is Rachel Ticotin. That is when Arnold meets this girl that might have been his girlfriend, or that might have been his enemy, who is now seemingly working in a kind of a bordello or something like that.
Hello, Hauser. Still bulging, I see. What you been feeding this thing?
Blondes.
I think it's still hungry.
I was trying to get him so that he would look at the girl in a loving and perhaps also amazed way. And I was trying to set up the shot for the camera so that you would see his eyes, that you would read in his eyes this kind of ambiguity between amazement and a forgotten world that he is not aware of completely anymore, isn't it? So it was, and then with love scenes, basically, Arnold had not done many love scenes, you know. So this was a little bit a love scene that I helped him through. Arnold was already a center there, you know, so it had to be people corresponding with Arnold and around him, so you would casting in a certain way. We started to cast. Sharon came in the first day. Fenton, the casting director, he had selected her not because she was so great or because she had a name, you know. She had no name at all. Yes, she had a bad name because she had been doing all these bad movies. But I didn't know much about that, you know. She came in and I took her for what she was, good looking, and I started to do a scene with her. I looked at it and I said, well, that's good. I mean, that's fine. And so that evening I sent the tape to Arnold and say, well, this is she's not so well known or not so perhaps in the right way, but look what she's doing. Look what she can do for us. And Arnold called me an hour later. I said, let's take her. Yes, absolutely. That was done. And the next day I found Rachel Ticotin. Strange, I mean, how these things can look like you made a very intelligent and decision that you had weighted everything against each other, the pros and the contrast, but that was not the case with these two women at all, you know. It was like, oh, that works, okay, boom, done.
Stop punishing yourself, Doc.
And then we took us enormous amount of time to find Dr. Edgemar, because I had the idea it has to be cast like the professor in Torn Curtain.
Of your desire to return to reality.
That is when Paul Newman goes over the curtain, the Iron Curtain, and has to steal a formulae from a Russian or whatever professor. And then that guy is so good. That guy that Hitchcock casted for that part. And I thought it has to be something like that. Somebody that has a certain naivete, a certain niceness. It was a bit strange, a bit exotic, a bit weird, I would say. The guy is certainly not, let's say, your normal top actor or something. He's a good actor, in fact, it was. But so I took forever to find that, because they always came with the wrong, and you know, and I was looking at it, no, not good. And then a day later, 3 others, not good. And that went on for weeks, till finally they brought him in, and then I thought, got it.
Honey, you wouldn't hurt me, would you, sweetheart? Sweetheart, be reasonable. After all, we're married.
Consider that a divorce.
the line, basically, consider this a divorce, comes from my scriptwriter Gary Goldman. He brought that line in, consider this a divorce. He brought in some other lines, because by then we were already like looking at Arnold, who had this kind of hasta la vista, whatever, and I'll be back. He had already used this kind of, let's say, very simplistic lines that had become the common language in it. I'll be back is well-known words. And of Arnold, well, a line that people use now, I'll be back, as a joke, but they refer to this movie, but they mean something else perhaps. But I mean, consider this a divorce was also one of these cute lines, in fact. I thought we had made an interesting movie, but you never know, you know. Even many movies, you go to the premiere and people say, oh great, wonderful, but you have no idea if it really works. The evening that it started in the theater, Ron Suchet, Gary Goldman, me, I think my wife was there and his wife, we hired a limousine. And then we moved around the blocks in Westwood to see how long the lines were. And then we knew, only then did we know it was a success. That basically, that cinemas, everything was sold out. And when it was not sold out, then it was about 3 screenings later in the evening, and you had big lines. It should be an adventure. You should be doing something always that you are not sure that you can do it. If you have the capacity to do it. If you are strong enough to do it, if you have the fantasy to do it, you know that only when it's done, isn't it? And then you think, well, I succeeded, more or less. And I think I need something like that, you know. I need to make a new movie, I need something that I have not done. I cannot do sequels. I've tried before, they tried me with Basic Instinct, RoboCop and whatever, Starship Troopers. I never done it, because I thought, why am I going to get up at 5 o'clock to do something I have already done? And that is so boring, and I think it has to be, so I need something new. I need to be insecure. I need to be, because it's an existential thing, you know. You have to step as an artist, I feel, into the unknown. I think that's what it should be. Arnold organized that. He organized this whole group for the publicity. Arnold was so on top of the publicity of the movie that he was with all the meetings about posters, about credit, of this or that. So he was totally PR engaged, Arnold. And this was one of his things. He said, Paul, let's go stand, because the Marsburger was there, I think, or something. I think he added that, I think. And say, we're going to stand there, and there's a great publicity photo. Tells me basically that Arnold liked to have a girl there, that he wanted me to have there, and to show what the movie was about, he put the guy there on the side. He organized it, huh? There was not a photo that the photographer invented, he did it.
Translated in Spanish is esposas. That means my wife. Okay. Makes sense to me.
Je suis Stéphane Bourgoin. Depuis plus d'une vingtaine d'années, j'ai une librairie à Paris spécialisée dans le roman policier, le fantastique et la science-fiction. Et en tant qu'anthologiste, j'ai fait des dizaines de recueils d'auteurs de science-fiction comme Frédéric Brown, qui a écrit notamment Martian et plein de nouvelles humoristiques autour de Mars. Et j'ai également écrit, à la fin des années 70, un certain nombre d'ouvrages sur le cinéma, et notamment le cinéma de science-fiction au travers de séries B, ou des ouvrages sur des réalisateurs tels que Roger Corman, Terence Fisher ou Richard Fleischer. De tout temps, Mars a représenté une sorte de mystère pour nous, terriens. La Lune était beaucoup plus proche, elle était visible. Mars, on n'a jamais su jusqu'à ces dernières décennies ce qu'il y avait réellement sur Mars. Un des thèmes favoris de la science-fiction, c'était ces fameux canaux martiens représentait-il un signe de vie? Existait-il une vie sur Mars? Et puis Mars, n'oublions pas, a toujours eu, depuis même le temps des Grecs et des Romains, été l'emblème du dieu de la guerre. C'était la planète rouge, le rouge qui représentait le sang. Donc Mars a toujours eu une connotation relativement agressive pour nous terriens. Et cette version agressive de Mars, on la retrouve aussi dans la littérature de science-fiction et naturellement au travers du cinéma de science-fiction. En ce qui concerne la littérature d'anticipation, Mars a d'abord été un relatif mystère qu'il fallait explorer. Donc au travers déjà de récits de la fin du XVIIIe siècle et dans le XIXe siècle, on a des récits d'exploration de Mars assez fantaisistes, puisque dans certains récits français, on atterrit sur Mars grâce à des ballons, puis ensuite à des dirigeables, les fusées n'existant pas. Je dirais que les premiers véritablement œuvres majeures de la littérature sur Mars viennent plutôt des anglo-saxons, et notamment de H.G. Wells en 1898 avec La guerre des mondes, qui fixe un peu des règles de la guerre entre les terrestres et les martiens, que l'on retrouve notamment avec le film de Tim Burton, Mars Attacks. Dans le cinéma de science-fiction des années 50, on a un nombre considérable au moment de la guerre froide de films qui sont en quelque sorte une transposition du communisme parallèle avec le côté agressif des martiens. Des films tels que Invaders from Mars, La guerre des mondes de Byron Askin ou le totalement délirant Red Planet Mars de Harry Horner qui date de 1952. Au début du XXe siècle, les Français aussi, notamment par Gustave Le Rouge, avec Le prisonnier de la planète Mars et La guerre des vampires qui date de 1908, nous racontent dans un style assez feuilletonesque qui ressemble un peu au récit de Gaston Leroux, de Maurice Leblanc, toute une exploration et une guerre avec des martiens. Au début des années 1910 et des années 20, et ça se poursuit jusque dans les années 50, aux États-Unis, il y a une véritable révolution de la presse qui intervient avec des choses que nous n'avons pas vécues ici. Des magazines bon marché qui s'appellent des pulp, pulp signifiant pâte à papier, et une véritable explosion de la littérature de science-fiction qui est publiée sous forme de nouvelles. Et ces pulps sont des magazines à couverture extrêmement bariolée. Et là, Mars a véritablement le beau rôle, à la fois de par ses dessins de couverture totalement délirants et par des récits de littérature populaire qui, au fil des décennies, vont s'affiner. Et la littérature martienne va véritablement connaître son apogée avec des récits tels que Martien Gaume de Frédéric Braun qui adopte un ton plus humoristique que Mars la guerrière qu'on a connu jusqu'à présent, ou véritablement aussi des récits extrêmement poétiques tels que les chroniques martiennes de Ray Bradbury. Philippe K. Dick, qui est un auteur de science-fiction depuis la fin des années 40, a apporté une touche assez nouvelle à la science-fiction, et je dirais une touche extrêmement adulte et presque paranoïaque, que l'on retrouve d'ailleurs dans l'adaptation cinématographique de Total Recall de Verhoeven, qui est probablement, à mon avis, celle qui respecte le plus l'esprit des récits de Philippe K. Dick. Il faut dire que Philippe K. Dick, au cours des années 60-70, est lui-même tombé dans une sorte de dépression due à des prises de substances hallucinogènes, et était devenu extrêmement paranoïaque. Et toute cette psychose de l'identité de l'individu que l'on retrouve à travers le personnage de Schwarzenegger dans Total Recall apporte une dimension véritablement novatrice à ce récit d'anticipation qu'est le film de Paul Verhoeven, qui est moins une vision science-fictionnelle de Mars aucune extrapolation sur des thèmes identitaires, une réflexion sur la violence que l'on retrouve dans des tas d'autres films de Paul Verhoeven, tels que Robocop par exemple. Total Recall, comme d'autres films de science-fiction tels que Dune par exemple, ont eu une gestation assez difficile. Le projet d'adaptation est confié à deux fanatiques de science-fiction, le producteur Ronald Shusett et le scénariste qui avait travaillé notamment avec John Carpenter, qui s'appelle Dan O'Bannon. Et cette mouture est confiée donc à Paul Verhoeven. Et le film marque véritablement, il date de 1990, une rupture avec les films de science-fiction de l'époque, et notamment une rupture totale avec tous les films qu'on a pu voir jusqu'alors, qui nous évoquent une planète Mars, à la fois par un côté très réaliste que l'on retrouve cette année avec des films tels que Red Planet ou Mission to Mars de Brian De Palma, c'est-à-dire l'approche réaliste de la conquête de l'espace, ou l'approche, je dirais, guerrière, qui trouve son apogée avec la parodie de Tim Burton, Mars Attack. Total Recall est moins un film spectaculaire de science-fiction que l'exploration, je dirais, un peu psychotique et totalement paranoïaque d'un individu interprété par Schwarzenegger. Et justement, je dirais que le choix de Schwarzenegger comme acteur dans ces deux incarnations de Hauser et de Quaid dans le film est un trait de génie. Au début du film, on a l'impression, notamment dans des séquences intimistes avec Sharon Stone, qu'il joue très mal. Il paraît tout à fait creux. Et en fait, on s'aperçoit à la fin du film que cette impression de creux était en fait véritablement tout à fait crédibilisée par les rebondissements du scénario, puisque ce personnage qu'il interprète d'ouvrier marié à Sharon Stone est totalement factice. À la suite des productions de Blade Runner et de Total Recall, on a eu un plus grand nombre d'adaptations de Philippe K. Dick, mais qui se sont peut-être déroulées avec des ambitions un peu moins démesurées, telles que Planète Hurlante ou d'autres petits films de série B jusqu'à présent. Je dirais que la novation totale de Total Recall, c'est son approche scénaristique, totalement paranoïaque, psychotique et très novatrice par rapport à des films de très gros budget, puisque Total Recall est à l'époque un des plus gros budgets de l'histoire du cinéma américain.
Nous sommes Caméléon Studio, un atelier d'effets spéciaux qui s'est créé maintenant depuis 1995. On est maintenant 3 à gérer cet atelier. Chacun de nous 3 s'occupe de postes différents, mais on a tous les 3 la même qualification pour réaliser des effets sur un tournage. Morgane, moi c'est Gérald, et le 3e s'appelle Kuno. Caméléon travaille sur différents types de projets. On travaille autant pour le cinéma, le théâtre, la publicité, la télévision de plus en plus. Il y a aussi un marché qui s'est développé pour nous qui est le particulier, qui nous demande de plus en plus des choses pour de la décoration intérieure, de la reproduction d'objets de cinéma pour des collectionneurs et des choses comme ça. On a travaillé entre autres sur le Pacte des loups, dont un des éléments est devant vous. Ensuite, on a travaillé aussi sur le film de Jeanne d'Arc par l'intermédiaire de Kuno qui était sur ce projet à la conception, maquillage, coiffure et effets spéciaux.
Total Recall s'était fait après Terminator et grâce à beaucoup de techniques faites en Terminator, Total Recall était un grand succès. Pour cet effet-là, c'est très important de comprendre le réalisateur et fait plusieurs coupes qui permettent l'effet d'être plus efficace. On regarde la scène d'abord, où Arnold enlève cette énorme balle de sa tête, qui c'était vraiment une vraie balle, la tête a explosé, quoi. Beaucoup de monde croit que les effets spéciaux c'est de la magie. Actuellement, c'est bien pensé en avant. Par exemple, au début, quand il fonçait l'aiguille dans son nez, c'était vraiment Arnold Schwarzenegger qui a pris ça dans le nez. C'est une aiguille truquée. Si on regarde tout doucement, cette partie-là qui nous dit « Ouah, c'est méchant, ça va faire mal ». C'est vrai, ça va faire mal. Mais quand il fonçait ça, vous regardez, il donne l'impression qu'il fonçait très loin. Mais actuellement, c'est une contraction dans la machine qui donne l'impression c'est lui qui fonçait ça dans le nez, mais actuellement, c'est rentré dans le manche. Ça, c'est le vrai comédien, ça, c'est le faux. Ça, c'est une tête mécanique, une marionnette enfin, qui fait toute la partie douloureuse. Dans le cas de ce film-là, ils ont le temps de mouler la tête de Schwarzenegger, mais le problème pour ce particulier effet où il tire la balle pour cet effet, et dans plusieurs effets actuellement dans le film, quand on regarde l'expression de le pauvre Arnold, quand il pique ce truc sur son nez, ne peut pas mouler quelqu'un comme ça. Pourquoi? Parce que le processus de moulage, il y a plusieurs techniques de moulage. Soit c'est fait avec le bande plâtrée, soit c'est fait avec l'alginette, qui est la technique la plus courante dans pratiquement tout le métier. C'est une espèce d'algue mélangée avec de l'eau. C'est une poudre. Et après, nous couvrons tout le visage avec ça. Après, nous faisons une coquille en bande plâtrée. Et quand nous enlève ça, nous avons un négatif de le visage de cette personne. Après, nous remplissons le moule avec la plate. Quand ça c'est sec et nous enlève l'alginette, nous avons une reproduction de cette tête en plate. Mais une expression comme ça, c'est impossible parce que la personne a besoin de garder cette expression pour minimum 10 minutes. C'est pas possible, il veut perdre, il veut pas rester crispé comme ça. Généralement, il veut prendre une sculpture de comédien et après, avec cette base, resculpter l'expression besoin pour le film. Ils ont plein de détails, tout le vein, toute la coloration, ça c'est l'éclairage qui aide. Mais une autre chose qui est très importante, regarde la langue. Il bouge. Tout bouge dans sa tête. Et ça, c'est très important. Si la langue n'a pas bougé, petit détail comme ça, à ce moment, on ne veut pas, c'est faux. Parce que tout bouge, tout est animé, c'est ça qui donne la vie.
Donc là, pour cette scène-là, en fait, il y a un double jeu qui est fait d'une part avec une véritable comédienne, qui est cette dame un peu forte, ainsi qu'une partie mécanique. Et après, une troisième séquence qui est montée avec Arnold Schwarzenegger en live. Pour reprendre cette scène-là en étape par étape, pour que ça donne plus de réalisme et pour que ça fonctionne vraiment bien, il y a aussi une question de mise en scène et de montage et de cadrage. La séquence, elle se démarre avec la grosse dame qui, elle, est vraie, qui va mimer le début de l'action jusqu'à là. Jusqu'au moment où elle va toucher son oreille. On la reprend dans un axe arrière pour pouvoir remonter avec une tête qui est mécanique, une première tête mécanique, celle où son oreille va sortir. Et ensuite, on reprend avec un nouvel axe, où là, c'est une tête complètement morcelée qui va pouvoir s'ouvrir avec la fausse tête d'Arnold Schwarzenegger à l'intérieur. Et on reprend encore une autre image et un autre axe, où cette fois, Arnold refait la fin du mouvement en emmenant cette fausse tête qu'il a, soi-disant, au-dessus de sa propre tête.
Juste cette séquence-là, quand il arrête de tomber, c'est le comédien, avec le maquillage déjà commencé. Et là, nous commençons à tomber sur la fausse tête, qui est articulée, qui est aussi une marionnette. Il utilise plusieurs têtes pour ça, parce que, comme je dis, il commence à gonfler. Et à un certain moment, le latex ne gonfle plus. C'est obligé de prendre une autre tête qui est encore déjà gonflée, il peut gonfler encore plus. Dans ce film, il y a beaucoup de travail de prothèse. Beaucoup de research, de créer des mutants de différents types. Tous le mère et la fille, qui est une mutation similaire, mais pas tout à fait la même. Tu vois, la prothèse, c'est délicat dans un film comme celle-ci, parce que de donner un aspect réel, ça demande beaucoup de travail.
Il y a un travail qui est fait à peu près comme la même base de ce qu'on a pu expliquer pour les têtes mécaniques, tout ça. On passe quoi qu'il arrive toujours par un élément qui est le moulage du comédien, si on peut, ou la personne qui va jouer ce rôle de mutant. On a donc toujours les mêmes étapes, moulage de sa tête avec l'alginate, un tirage d'un positif en plâtre, et sur ce positif en plâtre, on va pouvoir sculpter les déformations et les modifications corporelles que l'on va voir par la suite sur le film. Ensuite, il y a quand même un gros travail qui va être différentes petites étapes de moulage, de remoulage, de tirage et de peinture pour pouvoir arriver à obtenir une prothèse qui va être faite dans différents matériaux comme de la mousse de latex pour la plupart des prothèses qui étaient à l'époque sur ce film. Maintenant, les techniques ont évolué et on trouve de plus en plus des prothèses qui sont faites avec du silicone, avec des géaskin, des produits qui sont de plus en plus souples, qui donnent de plus en plus l'impression que cette fausse excroissance devient une véritable peau. Elle récupère la lumière, elle retransmet la lumière plus ou moins comme de la vraie peau.
Exemple, elle, cette partie de elle, c'est la vraie comédienne, mais la partie prothèse prend tout à moitié de ce visage. Le l'œil, c'est pas elle, le pauvre, mais c'est un nouvel œil qui était incorporé dans le masque, qui donne l'impression de peau qui tombe. C'est vachement bien fait.
L'astuce aussi qu'on peut trouver dans les prothèses, c'est pas obligatoirement de s'arrêter à la base de la prothèse, juste ce qui est coloré, mais de tromper l'œil du spectateur en lui faisant croire, comme les magiciens, que ce qui se passe dans la main gauche, en fait, il y a plein d'autres choses qui sont en train de se faire avec la main droite. Et en fait, le raccord de la prothèse de cette pièce que l'on rajoute sur le comédien est bien ailleurs.
Pour le pack de loup, par exemple, la femme et un des premiers cadavres qu'il a vu, c'est celle-là. Et dans le film, elle est attaquée par la bête. Et une grosse partie d'elle était mordue. Et c'est nécessaire, je fais des recherches, de voir les différentes blessures d'animaux faites par un gros chien, un lion, un tigre. Qu'est-ce que c'est le type de démarcation? Et qu'est-ce qui passe avec la peau après c'est mordu. Et te donne le plus de réalisme possible.
Pour ce type de cadavre, on a eu même un ami médecin urgentiste qui est venu nous voir et qui nous a raconté qu'est-ce que lui voyait en vrai. Maintenant, il y a une petite différence qu'on va faire. Il y a ce qui est vrai sur le terrain et ce que le réalisateur, les auteurs veulent voir, eux, où là, on va peut-être des fois avoir tendance à édulcorer et à faire que ça soit un peu plus esthétique pour éviter la violence de l'image. L'étape de conception sur un film se passe déjà bien avant de faire les moulages des comédiens ou quoi que ce soit. Où là, on va avoir un scénario entre les mains, une discussion avec la mise en scène, la production aussi, voir exactement ce qu'ils souhaitent eux voir. C'est un peu un travail de détective au départ, puisqu'il va falloir chercher quelle est l'image qu'a le réalisateur dans sa tête, ce qu'il va vouloir lui voir à l'écran, ce qui n'est pas toujours évident. Souvent, certains réalisateurs vont nous amener des documents pour prendre un point précis dans chaque image. Et on va être obligé de reconstruire ce puzzle en vue de pouvoir créer l'image qu'ils souhaitent. Alors ça, c'est une des premières étapes. Maintenant, il est vrai qu'il y a aussi certains réalisateurs qui vont avoir tendance à nous donner ce genre d'informations, mais arriver sur le tournage, vont soit changer d'avis, soit on fait évoluer leur idée.
Attachez votre ceinture.
Pour certaines scènes avec des effets spéciaux, on est obligé de restreindre et de dire qu'on limite un type de cadre. Et à ce moment-là, on demande de pouvoir travailler avec un storyboard. La peau humaine a une façon de réfléchir la lumière. Les différents produits qu'on emploie pour faire les déformations, qu'ils soient des prothèses directement sur le corps ou la reproduction de faux corps, ne va pas réfléchir la lumière de la même manière, ne va pas l'absorber de la même manière. Donc chaque produit qu'on va employer va demander un type d'éclairage ou du moins une mise en scène bien particulière.
c'est un peu un fantasme de beaucoup de l'homme. Et là, ils ont l'opportunité de faire en réel pour le film. Non, mais actuellement, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on appelle une prothèse corporelle. Ça veut dire que ça prend pas mal de corps. C'est un type de prothèse qui est à peu près comme cela, et c'est fini plus ou moins à cette taille. Et aucun sein, c'est elle, on le dit, hein, et tout le toit est faux. C'est bien fait, c'est fait avec de mousse, et je ne suis pas sûr si je me souviens, mais je crois qu'ils ont actuellement fait de prothèses creux, ils ont mis de sacs de l'eau dedans, donc quand elle bouge, ça bouge comme un vrai sein. C'est important l'éclairage parce que si elle est en mouvement, là elle est tout en mouvement, elle tourne, elle présente elle-même, elle présente ses seins. Quand on regarde comme ça, nous ne voyons absolument rien, mais si nous mettons pause en pause, nous pouvons voir la différence de couleur, de réflexion de la peau.
Donc sur ce type de prothèse donc corporelle, il y a deux types de métiers qui vont se télescoper. Il y a un travail qui va être fait en atelier, donc toute la fabrication de la prothèse jusqu'au tirage des prothèses. Puis il y a un travail sur le tournage qui va être fait là avec des maquilleurs qui sont spécialisés dans le type de pose de ce type de prothèse, mais surtout aussi dans la technique de camoufler la fausse peau et la vraie peau. Pour cette séquence-là, c'est pareil, on va se retrouver un peu comme pour la première tête tout à l'heure, un mélange de vrais comédiens, de marionnettes, de mécanique, de radiocommande. Là-dessus, il y a le personnage est quelque chose de mécanique.
À cette époque, c'est plutôt radiocommande, télécommande. Tu veux peut-être 5 ou 6 ou plus de personnes derrière la caméra qui est en train de manipuler une télécommande, de faire tout le mouvement de différents aspects. Peut-être une personne qui contrôle le bras du personnage, une autre qui contrôle les yeux et le tournement de tête, une autre qui fait la bouche. Un autre qui contrôle la tête et même juste le mouvement de la tête, de faire en position, ça demande une sacrée coordination. C'est une équipe de marionnettistes généralement. Toujours aujourd'hui, il y a plein de fois où c'est nécessaire, c'est quelques marionnettistes, mais avec la technologie d'aujourd'hui, maintenant, c'est possible de pré-programmer un alternateur, de faire certaines expressions. Il juste donne un micro de comédien et il parle. Et le son translate dans l'alternateur qui translate de la marionnette de bouche à bouche d'une certaine façon. Et toujours aujourd'hui, beaucoup de temps, c'est fait avec 1, 2, 3 marionnettistes quand même, parce que le problème ils ont trouvé dans certains films avec l'alternateur qui les pré-programme tout le mouvement, c'est que la marionnette veut tout le temps faire le même mouvement, mais le comédien peut-être veut jouer différemment. So, ils ont décidé quand même c'est bien, à partie c'est fait avec alternateur bien sûr, mais une bonne partie de l'épine c'est fait avec un comédien. Je crois pour lui c'était plutôt un marionnette sur le corps. Et peut-être, c'est dépendant de l'expression parce que dans certains films tu as peut-être une expression très tirée en arrière et une autre tout fermée. Le mousse de latex et le silicone, une autre particulière matière, il peut être tiré en arrière, mais il ne peut pas être rétracté. So, généralement, si c'est plusieurs expressions, il va faire plusieurs marionnettes avec un certain type d'expression prédéterminée pour la scène.
Voilà, sur celle-là, c'est en entier, puisque le comédien principal, celui qui porte Quato, là il faut. C'est une reproduction du comédien original pour permettre de mettre Quato à l'intérieur, de le centrer dessus. Mais à partir du moment où celui qui porte Quato se déplace, à ce moment-là, on remet un autre Quato différent en prothèse sur son corps pour lui permettre, mais moins compliqué, moins sophistiqué. Voilà. Parce qu'il y a différentes scènes comme les mains qui vont bouger, on va moins avoir. Là, c'est le véritable comédien qui va jouer l'action avec une mécanique qui va être un peu plus simple. Pour certains films, et Total Recall, à mon avis, fait partie de ceux-là, ce sont des films charnières clés entre Total Recall et les films que l'on va voir dans les prochaines années ou même encore cette année. L'évolution technique a fait énormément de bons. On utilise de plus en plus de nouveaux matériaux. On utilise l'infographie, on mélange le maquillage et l'infographie pour permettre de pousser encore plus loin la recherche de ce que les réalisateurs veulent donner de sensations dans leurs films.
Would you like to ski Antarctica? But you're snowed under with work? Do you dream of a vacation at the bottom of the ocean? But you can't float the bill? Have you always wanted to climb the mountains of Mars? But now you're over the hill? Then come to Recall Incorporated, where you can buy the memory of your ideal vacation cheaper, safer, and better than the real thing. So don't let life pass you by. Call Recall for the memory of a lifetime.
Recall, recall, recall.
Welcome to the frontier of filmmaking. Carolco presents Total Recall, the long-awaited science fiction thriller coming this summer. Total Recall is directed by Paul Verhoeven and stars Arnold Schwarzenegger with Rachel Ticotin, Sharon Stone, Ronnie Cox, and Michael Ironside. Set in the year 2084, the film tells the story of a man who discovers he is not who he thinks he is. As his reality shatters around him, he journeys to Earth's oppressed colonies on Mars to solve the mystery of his identity.
I don't even remember me.
Although it's a complete action movie, it's all about action and special effects, and it's a real Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cab. Where can I take you tonight?
Drive! Drive!
Would you please repeat the destination?
Oh, anywhere, just go! Go!
Please state a street and number.
Oh, shoot! Shoot!
I'm not familiar with that address.
On the other hand, it has a second level, which has to do with the mind, and what is real for the mind and not.
Based on concepts created in 1966 by legendary science fiction writer Philip K. Dick in his story I Can Remember It For You Wholesale, producer Ron Shusett, who co-wrote both Alien and Total Recall, has fashioned an exciting and complex plot that manages to question reality at every turn.
It constantly is deceiving the audience as to what's real and what isn't. And yet I don't think it's esoteric, because you are not confused, you are seduced into thinking something's one way, and then we reverse it on you.
Director Paul Verhoeven, whose acclaimed motion pictures include Soldier of Orange and The Fourth Man, first entered the realm of science fiction with the 1987 smash hit RoboCop. For Total Recall, Verhoeven has reassembled RoboCop's team of cutting-edge artists and technicians, all innovators in the science fiction and action film genres, including Academy Award-nominated cinematographer Jos Volcano, production designer William Sandell, and Academy Award-nominated special makeup and animatronics effects creator Rob Bottin. Joining them on this production is conceptual artist Ron Cobb of Star Wars, Aliens, and The Abyss, with special visual effects by DreamQuest Images of Scrooged, The Abyss, and The Lost Boys. It is the creative team's job to devise a believable future for Total Recall's story, complete with colonies on other planets and spaceships that shuttle to Earth and back.
By working with Bill Sandell, the production designer, we took his approach to the future, which is future on Mars, as you can see it from the designs here, is a certain look. And then we continue that into the effects, taking into account what the script calls for in terms of the dramatics, in terms of the views of Mars that cannot be created on the set. And then what we do is we work hand in hand. Mars is, in this film, dictated by what needs to happen there.
In March 1989, Verhoeven and his crew invaded the Churubusco studios in Mexico City. For 5 months, they took over every inch of the cavernous facility, creating more than 40 mammoth sets on all 10 sound stages. Overseeing 3 separate film units, Verhoeven created 2 vastly different worlds of the future. The barren, air-starved Martian colonies are actually modeled after NASA's own projected settlements on Mars.
What we do is an extrapolation what NASA is thinking for the next 20 years, only we pushed it much further forward to the next 100 years.
Makeup effects creator Rob Bottin developed a whole new race of mutant beings who have evolved on the planet Mars.
I'm a big fan of science fiction comics. That's all I read ever since I was like 5. So I love pulp artwork and things like that. So I really use a lot of those images that I recall from childhood, things that scared me or things that I felt very fascinating and drawn to visually, but non-offensive.
You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here, Hauser.
Look who's talking.
Hey, Tony, give the big guy a break.
Relax. You live longer.
Michael Ironside, an actor known for the intensity of his performances, portrays Richter, perhaps the most ruthless villain he has ever played.
Yeah, Richter's a very obsessive character who basically runs through this film, killing anything and destroying anything that gets in his way. Yeah, he's a wild card. He's a know-it-all. He's self-obsessed. He's not a good team player. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
After playing a corrupt corporate chief in RoboCop, Ronnie Cox gets the chance to portray a political heavy in Total Recall. Cohaagen, the ultimate authority on Earth's Martian colony, the man who literally controls the life-giving air and water the people of Mars depend upon.
He's the be-all and end-all on Mars. There is no limit to his powers on Mars. And he relishes using that power.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's dynamic screen presence provided an ideal match to Verhoeven's vision of the film's haunted character, Quaid.
It moves from the first frame to the last frame. He never sits still. Just moving, moving, moving. Adventure after adventure, action after action, thrill after thrill.
You can't do a simple routine double implant.
It's not my fault we hit a memory cap.
They'll be here any minute. They kill you all. What the hell is he talking about?
I don't know.